Hi, friends. Welcome to this show of the Federal. Today, we have seen the US Army under President Donald Trump has started imposing its blockade against Iran on the Strait of Hormuz, something it had threatened after the peace talks had collapsed in Islamabad, Pakistan, 2 days back. So today we have uh, the Federal's consulting editor and geopolitical expert K. S. Dakshinamurthy with us to speak on the matter that how this entire Iran affair or the Iran fiasco rather takes shape from here onwards and how Trump's new policy of imposing a blockade on Iran, something which he had vowed to remove a few days back, is going to affect the world economy, including India's interests. Welcome, Mr. Dakshinamurthy, to this show of Federal. So,
Thank you.
sir, my first question will be on, like we've seen Trump threatening to bomb Iran if he didn't remove the blockade on Strait of Hormuz, which has taken a massive toll on world economy. But now this is something he himself has threatened to do, put a blockade on Iran's Strait of Hormuz. So how do you think that this is going to work for the American interest in the region and what Trump is actually trying to achieve through this?
A complicated war is getting even more complicated. That is the that is the what the sum and substance of this is. Because if you look at this entire issue, the U.S. and Israel started striking Iran through missiles and drones on February 28th. Okay, now it was an unprovoked start of a war which has gone on for the last 45 days. And today, in fact, about half an hour ago, Trump has started enforcing a blockade of the Strait of Hormuz. Now, what does this mean, and how did it come to this point? Now, you see, the when Israel and the US started attacking Iran, Iran retaliated, okay, and the retaliated in a manner which the US and Israel were completely taken aback. So, because what Iran did was it did not strike back in a linear fashion. Instead, Iran started attacking US interests in the Middle East or West Asia, as we call it. So, basically the Gulf region. And of course, and also it started targeting Israel. But more than that, what Iran did was it internationalized the conflict. So, when it internationalized the conflict, it had an immediate impact around the world. And Trump has come under a lot of pressure, even within his own supporters and within the US, to halt this strike on Iran. And Iran is refusing to give in to some of these extreme demands, maximalist demands of Trump. For instance, Trump wants Iran to totally give up its nuclear program. It wants to give up its ballistic missile program, and it directly affects the sovereignty of Iran. And then when Israel and the US started the conflict, they said, they insisted that they're going to do regime change or change the Islamic regime in Iran. So none of these things have happened. Now, Trump got increasingly frustrated and he threatened to bomb Iran's power grid and also some of the civilian infrastructure in Iran. And Iran said, if you do that, then the entire region will burn. So it came till a point where the world was on an edge, and then Trump, said he threatened that he would send Iran back to the Stone Ages, whatever he meant by that. But thankfully, that did not happen, and then there was a ceasefire at the last minute, thanks to Pakistan, Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia. They got together and they put pressure on Trump, and Trump backed off. Now, in the talks that happened, again, the US is insisting, on the maximalist demand, which is that Iran should give up on its nuclear program. Now, Iran says it cannot give up on its nuclear program because it is its legitimate right to have this program. So now that Iran is saying no, and then Trump and Israel thought that by bombarding Iran and by decimating its armed forces to whatever extent, the navy, the air force, and the military, whatever, Trump miscalculated, say, thinking that Iran would give in, but Iran has not given in. And on the contrary, Iran blocked the Strait of Hormuz. Along with its other actions in the Middle East, it blocked the Strait of Hormuz. And then it started allowing that is, nations friendly to Iran, to traverse this Strait of Hormuz. So then the US suddenly realized that it was not going as per its wishes. And then, so when the negotiations in Pakistan failed, Trump thought that it would be in an interesting twist. He would turn the whole thing around and block the Strait of Hormuz. Now, why would he want to do that? By blocking the Strait of Hormuz, what Trump is trying to do is saying that even the friends of Iran, he mainly means China, the friends of Iran too should get affected by this entire issue. And he wants the friends, that is China and other friendly nations, probably including India, to put pressure on Iran to give in to the US. So you see, he's trying to turn the tables around Iran. What Iran was trying to internationalize the issue by blocking the Strait of Hormuz and putting pressure on the US to back off because other countries were getting affected, like the allies in Europe and the world in general. Now, but at the same time, Iran was a little relaxed as far as its friends were concerned. So ships with LPG and crude were coming to India. They were going to China. They were going to some other countries in Southeast Asia. But they were not allowing ships which are close to the US or Israel to transfer the Strait of Hormuz. So what Trump is now trying to do is shut the whole thing off so that everybody feels the pressure, and Iran will in turn get pressurized by friends to open up the blockade. But it doesn't look like it's going to be so simple, because if by chance there is a conflagration that happens in the Strait of Hormuz, if Iran retaliates or if any country tries to beat the blockade, what will the US do then? Because the US has not made clear what will happen if anybody beats this blockade. They have not said what they're going to do. And if somebody tries to beat the blockade, then we don't know where it's going to lead.
So you have spoken about a very interesting point about China. Actually, I was thinking about asking on those lines. See, I mean, through this targeting of Iran and also Strait of Hormuz and all, is US also playing to another war theater, that is China? Because since China is a major challenger to the US economy in other fields, so by blocking the fuel supply to China, I mean, even in case of Venezuela, also I think Venezuela, China's terms have always been good. So by attacking those countries, is it? Is China is also an indirect target of Washington D.C. so that to prevent it from this rise in the near future to challenge the U.S. economy, or rather the hegemony.
Right. The what Trump has done is he is trying to imagine that the Strait of Hormuz is similar to what happened in Venezuela. He was successful in Venezuela in the sense that he has been able to block the oil supplies from Venezuela to friendly countries like to Cuba. So Cuba is experiencing the difficulties following this blockade. And not only that, the US has now got control over Venezuelan oil, and now he's dictating terms as far as Venezuela is concerned. So he probably, if he's imagining that the same thing is going to play out in the Strait of Hormuz, I think he will be mistaken, because number one, China is not Venezuela. China is, probably the only power today in the world which can challenge the US. And China and Iran are very close, and China depends heavily on Iran and the Strait of Hormuz to get its essential supplies. So China is not going to keep quiet. In fact, China has been trying to bring about some kind of a ceasefire. In fact, the talk is that behind these four countries, that is Pakistan, Egypt, Turkey, and Saudi Arabia, it was the China which was the moving force, though it did not come up front. At the background, it was playing a massive back channel role. And so for China, it is very imperative that this conflict ends. Not only for China, even for Europe, for everybody else. But Trump is trying to target China and trying to put pressure on Iran. It is not it is not right now. We are not discussing the rivalry between US and China. Actually, this is not between US and China. It is an attempt by Trump to put pressure on Iran by blocking China as well. Because if you let's assume hypothetically, if the US manages to successfully blockade this Strait of Hormuz, China is going to get affected. Not only China, of course, India is also going to get affected. In fact, the entire world will get affected. right? But China fundamentally is a big country, and China will not keep quiet. It will try to somehow convince. That's what Trump hopes, that to Iran, and say to come to come to some kind of a agreement so that this impasse ends. But Trump is taking a huge gamble because it is means the Strait of Hormuz has reached a flashpoint. One wrong move by either Iran or by the US, or if any country tries to break the blockade and tries to defy this blockade, then what will the US do? Will the US bomb that particular country, or will Iran, if a country friendly to the US, let's say Israel, tries to get pass through the get its freight across through the Strait of Hormuz, what will the US do? Will it keep quiet? If the US keeps quiet, what will Iran do? Will Iran then attack? Then if Iran attacks, how will the US retaliate? So it's going to be, it's gone into a very very tough kind of a, and very dangerous flashpoint, and it can go blow up any which way.
So going by Trump's movements, I mean, we have seen in the past that he has reasserted the I mean, the doctrine that the Western Hemisphere belongs to the US. But now the US has come to the Eastern Hemisphere also. And does Trump, I mean, even though the US Army, I mean, Navy is one of the finest, as Trump has said, but does it really have that logistical thing and also the political and diplomatic backing? I mean, the European allies have, they straight away they abandoned Trump's aspirations. So if that is not happening, then I mean, how far the ambition is going to work out for Trump? I mean, putting a permanent blockade in the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, the Strait of Hormuz is not like what happened in the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. That was very close in next door. So Strait of Hormuz, that is not going to be so easy for the US either. Even like such a strong force like the US.
See, let's look at the legality of it. If you take the war itself, the strike between by Israel and US on Iran is illegal. There is no legal backing to it. The supporters of Trump say that it was a preemptive action by Iran, which was now planning to attack. All this is hypothetical. It's completely, it cannot be proven. So it is something that nobody has accepted. So it is fundamentally an illegal war to begin with. Now, if you come to the blockade of the Hormuz Strait, that is again illegal because you require a UN Security Council resolution to do any such blockade. And the Trump, of course, hasn't done any of that. So he's saying that he's going by the freedom of navigation, and freedom of navigation is available to all countries in international water. So he's using that reasoning to blockade, but that blockade itself does not have the stamp of the UN Security Council. So it's a priori, it's illegal. What he's doing is unprecedented, illegal, and like many other things he has done in the recent past, it is not backed by any kind of international consensus, decision making, any kind of a settlement, nothing. It's a unilateral, arbitrary move. In fact, the Keith Starmer of the UK, the British Prime Minister, has categorically said that he will not have anything to do with the Strait of Hormuz and this blockade, and they will not come into this picture at all. Because why that is important is because the European Union and the allies of the US in Europe had kind of decided that they would all band together and do something much more substantial after the conflict ends about the Strait of Hormuz. Talk to Iran and figure out a way by which it can be some kind of normalcy can be restored. But at this point in time, Starmer is, in fact, just now, a few minutes ago, he very clearly stated that there is no question of the UK entering the Strait of Hormuz in any manner. They're not going to intervene at all. And so, obviously, even the other European powers will obviously be following the same route. So, Trump again is isolated. Is doing a is kind of in a sense getting exposed. His actions are getting exposed, and I would say broadly that this move also reflects this larger confusion in the US think tank. They're unable to figure out how to proceed with the conflict and how to make Iran bend to their will. That's fundamentally, I think, the desperation that we are seeing now.
So they say it's easy to start a war, but it's very difficult to end a war. So do you think that Trump now is in that position where he cannot things are out of his control and he cannot really put an end to this Pandora's box now.
See, he can do it. He can end the war, but it'll be at a terrible loss of face. And Trump, being the president of the United States, and as a person who's given to bombastic statements and who believes that he's some kind of a supernatural being, he can't imagine giving up and giving in to like Iran, a country like Iran. So it has become in some sense, sadly for the world, a kind of a ego issue. And as far as Iran is concerned too, if Iran gives in to the US and says that, okay, we will not pursue our nuclear program, within the country, the government will lose face. In fact, it could even be the beginning of the end of the government. I mean, because the nuclear program has become such a big issue in Iran that the government can't afford to say that we'll just let go. You see, so both have got caught up in this clash, and both are unwilling to give in. And we are seeing one mad situation after another, and taking the world, keeping the world on the edge. And the consequences can simply go out of hand for all of us. I mean, with no exceptions.
Especially with the midterm elections coming up this year. I mean, it's a very testing time for Trump as well because the Republicans lose their
Yeah,
clout, then it's another major problem.
that's
So,
right.
I mean, from India's point of view, let's come to India now. So, what do you think? Like, I mean, if this crisis continues for the energy security and also from the diplomatic point of view, do you think that, and especially after Pakistan's proactive role that we have seen and the Indian opposition's crying foul against the Modi government, saying it failed to, it was a diplomatic failure. So what do you think that India has something to do at this point of time, right, or going forward?
See, India, the interesting part is India is friends with all the countries, with China. I mean, though India and China have a little bit of a testy relationship, they still are friends. They have a massive trade relationship. So India does have a communication line with China, and India has a very good relationship with Trump, and so does it have a relationship with Iran. In fact, India could have played a big role in mediating and bringing about some sort of a settlement. Unfortunately, the Indian policymakers didn't think along those lines, and then Pakistan came into the picture, and Pakistan also tried to do something. And I would still say that Pakistan's mediating role is still not over. It's just that this particular round did not work. It does not mean that it's kind of ended. I'm sure that the countries in the Middle East, the Arab countries, and Pakistan are continuing to have back channel conversations with both Iran and with the US, and I'm sure that process is on. It's just that on the face of it, it hasn't worked. And as far as India is concerned, India, I think, probably really has not such a big role. It doesn't seem to have taken for itself that kind of a role. So we will either benefit if the war ends, or we're going to struggle like the rest of the world if the war continues. I mean, that's about it. I don't see any particular diplomatic role that India, is probably going to do at the present moment, looking at what has happened over the last few weeks.
My final question will be, so again, continue with India. So, do you see any change in the foreign policy orientation of New Delhi from this point onwards? I mean, keeping
Yeah, I mean, I would
West Asia
really
situation.
Yeah, actually, I would really think that India should really think on its feet, quickly, change the way it is relating to the dispute, and India should probably get more proactive. It's proactive in this role, and in this situation, and then it's to the credit of everyone if it does work. So there's really nothing wrong, because like Pakistan is friends with the US, it's friends with Iran, and also with China. India too is similarly positioned, right? So India is and India is a bigger cloud, being a bigger country, and having and being a country that had a lot of credibility in the past as far as its non-alignment was concerned. So there is a certain history to it. So I think it would be good if Indian foreign policy can evolve a little bit and change as per the according to the situation rather.
And what about the Israel, the Israel connection of India? I mean, India has shown extreme obsession with Israel of late. I mean, even the Chabahar port in Iran and all those that's been hugely sacrificed in this war. So, keeping those in mind, I mean, India's path to Central Asia is highly dependent on Iran. So, from that point of view, do you think that a very healthy India-Iran relationship is very key in the future days.
You are right, actually, because India is probably one of the countries which also has a line with Israel, which Pakistan does not have. But Israel is obsessed with Iran. I don't think Israel is in a position to listen to anyone, including Trump and the US. Because I don't think Israel has reacted very well to any kind of a ceasefire, even if the current ceasefire which Trump announced after initially hedging, Israel said it would continue its attack on Lebanon. So it was made clear that Lebanon was part of the deal. So Israel is, and also there have been other instances which have shown that Israel does not want this to end. Israel wants to continue attacking Iran. So I think it would be very difficult for India to make a break. But of course, there's nothing called impossible in international politics. So if India makes the attempt and convinces Israel to kind of go slow on Iran and come to some kind of a rethink on the entire issue. I mean, even that would be great, actually. I mean, so it's very much possible that India can take up that.
Thank you, Mr. Dakshinamurthy. Thanks a lot for your insights on the current situation that is happening in Iran. And we'll be talking again in the next episode from all this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks.